Back at it here on the Hornet Nation podcast, as always, joined by head coach Rodney Southern. Coach, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Man, it's still hot outside. I thought maybe last week we got teased with a little bit of fall, but it's still pretty hot.
Yeah, it was actually really humid Monday morning for practice, and I think Friday night's supposed to be in right at 95 to 100 by kickoff. So you just got to get used to it, and hopefully one of these days it'll cool off.
Well, we'll look back a little bit to Bryan here, and then of course we'll talk about the upcoming matchup versus Belton. Before we kind of dig into that, speaking of the heat, UIL has some rules in place this year that have really protected the students. They always do a good job trying to come up with new ideas. Has that really maybe played a factor with you guys in practicing or anything like that this year?
Not really. We started early in the year practicing our freshmen after school or at 4 o'clock, and everybody asked me, and I said, well, at some point you have to acclimate, because when school starts, because of how our bus schedule and all that is, we can't practice everybody before school. Now, we get a lot of work done with our varsity guys early, but our freshmen had to acclimate to it, and I thought they handled it pretty well, because it was brutal hot, the first part of August. But, I thought the other night in our game against Bryan, we played a lot of snaps, and I thought our kids handled it pretty well. We didn't have a bunch of cramping like some teams do. So, it actually hasn't bothered us, because I think our biggest deal is we take every one of those summer workout days that we get, we're outside and we're in the heat, and I think that now has contributed to, how good a shape we're in at the start of a season.
Well, team improving to 1-1 on the season, very convincing win there, battling Bryan, and good turnout too. I mean, a lot of folks made that trip down there, and you look at this game and go back as 61-27. So I was reading through some of the notes, and Lisa does such a great job putting together history. I believe the most points since 2019 that the Hornets have been able to put up. What really led to the success in that game, Coach?
Well, I think, you start out, we made a mistake again the first drive. We got stalled and we got a punt blocked. And, that's something we've got to correct. We've had a problem 2 weeks in a row. And then we had probably way too many penalties. But if you flip to the other side, we scored 34 points in the second quarter. We scored, obviously, 61 total points. We had 8 different people score touchdowns. We scored in the kicking game. We scored defensively. And obviously, we had 7 guys do something offensively to get in the end zone. Of course, Braylon Phelps got 2 of those. But, overall, I thought, again, our O-line, D-line played pretty decent. There were times O-line where we weren't as good and crisp as we wanted to be. I thought our D-line inside played pretty good. I thought our edge guys were not quite as good as they were the week before. But, offensively, we were throwing and catching the ball. We had success running it. I thought defensively, for the second week in a row, we tackled extremely well. Juwan Giddings probably had the game of his career. And obviously only being his second game to start defensively. But, and of course then when you have a kickoff return for a touchdown, you have a D lineman intercept a screen for a touchdown. Those things don't happen very often in games. But, it was kind of the perfect storm, especially the second quarter.
It's one of those games that you want to just relive over and over again. And we know as things go on, competition gets tough. And we're still a couple of games away from district play. We always say that game 1 to game 2 is kind of the area that you really feel maybe that's the most improvement. And do you kind of feel like you saw that in this game?
Well, I think what you need to fix, and you hope it's not a physical thing. You hope it's not an execution thing. You hope it's some other factors. And I thought we fixed most of those. The penalties are still a concern. We had 14 and they had 11. But the difference compared to a week ago, we had 3 offsides and 2 false starts last week. This week it was a couple hustling penalties. You could call holding every play. But we didn't have an offsides in terms of a jumping offsides. The other touchdown that we got called back, Juwan actually was on a blitz and was a little bit offsides. But you can take those kind of penalties, but again, the number of them is still too much.
Seeing young guys continue to grow and develop. A young man like Melton Green III had a standout game as well through the air, and then return touchdown, Kadarian Easley there with an interception and a return back. What does that really do for their confidence? And then I guess from the coaching perspective, does it ever make things maybe a little bit easier to coach when these guys seem like they're finally getting it, starting to understand the rhythm?
Well, I think when you look, Melton's, or third as everybody calls him, has played, for us on and off in different positions, and I think he's really bought into being a receiver and running the right routes and doing the things you need to do. And Austin and Marcus both had opportunities to hit him. Austin hit him twice on big plays, and then he had two other crossing routes that he caught that he got big gains on. Of course, he scored a touchdown as well. But just overall, and you get in a kind of an unusual situation when, like, we ran a kickoff back and then we intercept that pass and run it in for a touchdown. Well, you got to turn right back around and go back out there defensively. We played a bunch of snaps. We only had one series offensively in the second quarter, but we scored 34 points off of things that just happened so fast. And we only had one where we actually drove the ball and had a real series. We made some big plays, and obviously when you make that many plays and score that many points, you're excited, but at the same time there's other things. We didn't get a lot of snaps offensively, but we got a lot the third and fourth quarter.
Going up against a Belton team now here that's 2-0 on this season, victories versus Hendrickson and as well as Brenham to start the season, a program that you're obviously very familiar with. What do you kind of feel like? I know these questions kind of get redundant, but maybe just the mindset heading in, some areas that you really feel. I know penalties you talked about, just to kind of give us a little preview of how that looks heading into this ball game.
Well, I think they're a little unique. They physically whipped us last year in every phase of the game. They beat us on both offense and defensive lines, and we made some mistakes, but they're a little bit different team now. They're not as big physically as they were a year ago, but they play really hard. You can tell he's got them coached up on the mental part of the game to play hard. They've got a young quarterback. He actually is the son of one of their coaches who was on my staff part of my time there. So, and he's come in and done a really good job. He makes everything they do offensively go. He's a good athlete. You can tell he's a coach's kid because he understands the game. And I know his dad, and I know his family. His family had several members that played. A couple of them played professional baseball. So he's obviously a good athlete, and I think he kind of makes them go. And it's misleading when you see it on film. And I told our kids that Saturday when you look at it, because they don't look as big and physical as they did a year ago, but they had Brenham 20-6 with 10 minutes to go in the game, and so the score of that game is really not kind of indicative of what the actual game was. They had Brenham's number the entire night.
You go up against a program such as Belton. Obviously, you've been here for 10 years now. Is there ever any just moments where you look back and say, it was a good time, I know you're enjoying being here, but is there any connection still? Do you ever talk to any of those coaches, any of the staff that's there?
Well, a lot of the staff, obviously, over a 10-year period is turned over. The head baseball coach is a freshman coach there, and he was on my staff there, and he's been in Belton a long time. A couple other guys have moved from coaching into administration. Their trainer actually just came back from Mary Hardin Baylor, and he was my trainer the time I was there. But I always, Saturday morning, I look at teams' rosters, and I see some last names that is probably brothers or cousins. But once you've been removed 10 years, and the school district split, and they now have two high schools, so it's changed significantly. Now they're still in the building that we built there, which was something I was obviously very proud of because it's a great facility.
Well, Coach, as always, appreciate your time. 7:30 kick back at Bowers. Looking forward to this matchup.
All right, thank you.
There he is, head coach Rodney Southern, also athletic director here with the Huntsville Hornets. We'll step aside, more to come. Stay tuned in and locked in here on Hello Huntsville and this podcast.